The streak is over. The Rangers stumble in Columbus and lose 4-2. We're going to break down everything that went wrong, why it might be a good thing that the Rangers are playing the Jackets again on Wednesday. Also going to talk about Matt Rempe and his continuing to get into fights game after game and if he can sustain that, and a couple of areas where the Rangers must improve going forward.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1013 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Rangers obviously were not at their best in last night's game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Just felt like they were a half step behind the Jackets the entire game. Obviously struggled to defend the Jackets when they were attacking on the rush. And, you know, the better team won this game, the better team for that night. Let's make that clear. The Jackets are not a better team than the Rangers, but they were for the game last night, and that's really all that matters, and it was reflected in the final score. Before we get into the details and kind of, nitpick the things that the Rangers did wrong in this game, I think it's only appropriate we kick off today's episode, the top of the show, by giving the Rangers some props for this amazing win streak that they put together here. Just a complete 180. It started with their final game before the All-Star break, their final game of January, erasing a 2-0 deficit against the Senators, winning 7-2, and they have been on fire ever since, winning 10 consecutive games. They tied their franchise record with those 10 straight wins. Just for some context there, one of the other two times that they did it was in 1940. Of course, the Rangers won the Stanley Cup that season. And also, I want to say, they mentioned it a game or two ago. I want to say it was during the 1972-1973 season. But bottom line, it's been a really long time since the Rangers have won 10 consecutive games. And of course, there were ties back then, so maybe it was a little bit more difficult back then than it is now. But regardless, an unbelievable accomplishment, 10 straight wins. I believe they also said that this was the second longest winning streak in the NHL this season, only to Edmonton, which won 16 games not all that long ago under former Wolfpack coach Chris Knobloch. But obviously, the franchise record just was not meant to be. I do think, though, that even after a tough showing here, we can really appreciate what an amazing winning streak this was. And again, really appreciate the fact that they've done a complete and utter 180 from where this team was in January to where they are right now as we approach the end of February. Got one last game left against the Jackets, and obviously you hope that they can bounce back and the month on a positive note. I mean, I tweeted out the other day, and maybe I jinxed them, that the Rangers could go undefeated in February if they won two more games, and both those games were against the Jackets. And of course, they then lose their next game. But be that as it may, it's still been an amazing month here. And I think Ranger fans feeling a heck of a lot better about where this team is at the end of February than they were at the end of January. And one other thing that I mentioned on Twitter when I threw that out there, that they were on the verge of potentially having a perfect month of February, is just the fact that the Jackets always seem to play the Rangers tough. And we've seen examples of that this season. Obviously, what happened last night, Jackets were the better team. They won the game 4-2, basically outplayed the Rangers in just about every facet of the game, and it ended the Rangers' winning streak as well. And then if you look at what else has happened this season, the Jackets also beat the Rangers 5-3 in Columbus in the second game of the season. That was all the way back on October 14th. And then the Rangers beat the Jackets in November on the 12th, but that was at Madison Square Garden, and it occurred in a shootout. So we are very, very close to potentially being 0-3 against the Jackets. And not only did that Lone Ranger win against the Jackets occur in the shootout, Alexis Lafreniere had to tie this game with 11 seconds left. He had Panarin at the blue line firing a shot at the net. Kreider ends up with it. slips a nice little backhand pass to Lafreniere. Lafreniere stuffs it in, and that tied the game, sent it to overtime. And like I said, ultimately the shootout, Lafreniere also scored the only goal of the shootout, and Jonathan Quick stopped all 3 shooters that he faced in the shootout. But that's it. I mean, that's your Ranger versus Jacket history lesson for what's happened so far this season. And what's the actual reason for this? Like, why do the Rangers, why are they scuffling against this team that, pretty much just about year in and year out, no disrespect intended, but they're not a good team. This is not a team that has rich and illustrious history here. They are typically not good, and they're in dead last, not just in the Metro, but in the entire Eastern Conference right now. So why do the Rangers have so many problems with this team? Apart from the, kind of standard answers that you could give to this question and kind of the things that immediately pop into your mind, like, well, they're playing down to the competition, or they just played some division rivals, tough game against Philly, the crazy game against the Islanders, the big win against the Devils, maybe a little bit of a letdown game here against the Jackets, or somebody could throw out the ultimate cliche that, well, it's a trap game. Well, all those things might be true to a certain extent, but to me, the thing that's a little bit more tangible, it was something that was mentioned by Sam and Joe not before the game, but fairly early in the game last night, and something that was on display for pretty much the entire game is the very simple fact that the Jackets, for all their struggles, are very good at scoring off of the rush. And you can see that. They're a very dangerous team. They get through the neutral zone very quickly. They seem to get the puck out of their own zone very fast as well. And, they're off to the races. And whether you're the Rangers or really anybody else, if you're not prepared for that, even against a Jackets team that obviously has struggled this year, you're going to have your hands full with them, at least in that aspect of the game. And we saw a lot of examples of that. Jackets, once again, were flying through the neutral zone against the Rangers, flying over the Ranger blue line, getting very little resistance. And it wasn't even just odd man rushes. Anytime the Jackets got the puck out of their zone, it felt like they were kind of just off to the races. And they were moving quickly and looking dangerous just about every time they had the puck and they were heading toward the Ranger zone. This game, honestly, probably could have been a lot worse than 4-2 if Jonathan Quick had not made some of the really nice saves that he made in this game. But, for all those reasons that I just mentioned, everything that, the Jackets did that caused the Rangers some problems, obviously, attacking on the rush, they were very good in that area, and the Rangers struggled to contain them in that area. The other thing, I thought the Jackets were really quick to get to loose pucks, and the Rangers, they have been lately, but they weren't in this game. And so for all those reasons, I actually like the fact that the Rangers are going to play this team again on Wednesday. Because, they seem to be the Rangers' kryptonite this year. They're an Achilles heel for this Ranger team. And obviously, again, at times this season, defending against the rush has been a problem for the Rangers. They've been better at it recently. But again, they scuffled in this game. It's a good test for this team to go up against the same group of players here. There shouldn't be any surprises at this point. You know which guys are fast and which guys can get moving through the neutral zone and which guys are dangerous. You should be ready to deal with it. You got to tighten things up defensively and hopefully at least put something of a stop to it, because, the Rangers, that is an issue for them, dealing with, the speed and the transition game of other teams. So we'll see how they fare, in I was going to say round 2, but really it's round 4 against the Jackets on Wednesday. They got a couple days to figure it out. Hopefully they make good use of that. And like I said, end February on a positive note. So we'll see how it goes on Wednesday. We, in just a second, are going to turn our attention to a couple of other things that happened in this game. I want to talk about the 2 Ranger goals that they scored and why, even in a situation where the Rangers have won 10 in a row, it kind of felt like those goals were fool's gold in a way. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. Also going to talk about a couple of the lines being juggled as well. Going to have some thoughts on that. And, of course, Matt Rempe getting into another fight very early in a game. And like I said, we will get to all that fun stuff in just a second. First, though, we definitely would like to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. It is past the halfway point of the season, Ranger fans, and the Rangers basically coast to coast on top of the Metro Division despite this most recent loss. But regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Panarin or Kreider or Mika or Igor will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Ranger fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleepers terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. Do want to let everybody know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. Wanted to discuss the Ranger goals and why they just didn't have the feel to them that they should. Obviously, we're feeling good right now. The vibes are awesome, not just among, the Ranger players, but I think the fan base is starting to feel good again, too. And maybe if you were skeptical about the Rangers going all in and, trading for this guy and trading for that guy, maybe you feel a little bit better about them doing that, as the trade deadline fast approaches here. And I'm usually an optimist. I'm usually that person that thinks, the Rangers are in it. They still have a chance. If things go their way, they're gonna be the last team standing. And you guys know, the everydayers, you guys know that I tend to keep things mostly positive on here. I'll call them out when I have to. But in this game, again, despite the recent winning streak, 10 games in a row, when the Rangers scored these two goals, and both of them tied the game. The first one from Panarin tied the game at 1-1. Second goal from Edstrom tied the game at 2-2. It just never really felt like that was going to lead to the Rangers, pulling away with a big win and going on a run here. It just felt to me like watching this game, they were always kind of just a step behind the Jackets. The Jackets were always getting to the loose pucks. They were getting far more second chance opportunities than the Rangers were, winning some board battles as well. I thought Jonathan Quick had a much more difficult night in net than Merzlikins did. I know Merzlikins won the game. I thought Quick was the guy that was out there making the really impressive saves, though, despite letting 4 in. But yeah, it just never really had that feel to it. The Rangers came back twice and tied it, but even when they did, it just felt like it was fool's gold. And look, they were good goals. Obviously, props to the guys who made it happen here. They all count. But I never felt that, being tied 1-1, being tied 2-2 was in any way indicative of how this game was going for the Rangers. The Rangers, they never really had, maybe until the third period. Third period, they did this a little bit, but they never really had that long, sustained offensive zone possession. As I just mentioned, the second chance opportunities were basically nowhere to be found for this team. Just no traffic in front, no deflection attempts really. Just not in any way making life difficult on Elvis Merzlikins. And with all that said, again, when you see these Ranger goals, they're nice and everything, but it just never felt like they were going to get it going after that. Case in point, first goal of this game goes to Artemi Panarin. And what happened on this play? Well, you get a nice defensive play by Adam Fox. It looked like the Jackets were going to pretty easily get the puck out of their zone and go up the ice, presumably on another rush, a dangerous-looking rush that the Rangers would struggle to defend. But instead, Adam Fox, a nice play at the blue line, keeps the puck in, and then goes up the boards to Artemi Panarin. Panarin's on the right side. He moves toward the net. Absolute snipe. Just picked the top corner on the near side over the left shoulder of Elvis Merzlikins. Ties the game at 1-1. Great play by Fox. Great shot by Panarin. Take nothing away. But you watch this goal, it's just kind of an out-of-nowhere goal. And it's a beautiful goal by Panarin and a beautiful shot, but it wasn't the result of the Rangers doing a bunch of blue-collar work. It wasn't the result of a long offensive zone time. It wasn't even really a result of the Rangers out-hustling the Jackets. It was a nice play by Fox, but yeah, it wasn't really any of those things. This goal kind of came out of nowhere. So too did the Rangers' second goal that was scored by Adam Edstrom. And this one occurred in the second period. And like I said, tied the game at 2-2. And again, take nothing away from Edstrom and even Matt Rempe. They were both kind of involved here. Nice play by Edstrom, stealing the puck in the neutral zone. He goes hard up the left side, and he's running out of real estate. So he tries to slip a short pass in front to Matt Rempe. Props to Rempe. He's there. He's crashing the net, looking to create havoc and, maybe looking for the pass or, get a dirty goal, which I guess you could sort of call this a dirty goal, but not really. It was basically a lucky bounce. And again, good job by Edstrom. Good job by Rempe getting to the net, trying to make something happen. But Edstrom passes this to Rempe. It goes off the, was it the stick or the skate? I'm having a hard time remembering now. I think it was the skate of a Columbus defender. But either way, off a defender and into the net. And yeah, that tied the game at 2-2. But again, this was an out of nowhere goal. They got a lucky bounce, and it wasn't the result of any kind of sustained offensive zone pressure. All the sustained offensive zone pressure in this game belonged to the Blue Jackets. That was especially on display early in the second period. Rangers weren't ready to go at the start of the second period. The first 4, 5, 6 minutes were all spent on the Rangers side of the ice, and the Rangers were just really back on their heels, and that's just not the way that you want to start any period, really, against any opponent at any time in the game. And as I mentioned, they got it rolling in the third period. They had a lot of shots on goal in the third period. They at least had their chances, but by then you're in a 2-goal hole. It's doable. You can come back, but not an easy thing to do either. And it was too little too late. They had that power play at the end of the game too. They had the 6-on-4, a couple of chances there, but again, they just ran out of time. And as far as, creating offense and creating pressure, you can't do it for only 20 minutes and expect to win the game. It's nice that they at least finished strong and didn't give up, but ultimately, the way the Rangers played in this game just was not going to add up to 2 points as it had in the previous 10 games. Another interesting thing that happened in this game was the Rangers mixing and matching and juggling the line combinations a little bit. Now, this originally started in the first period because Matt Rempe got into a fight. I mean, stop me if you've heard me say that in the last couple of episodes. But Rempe had to leave the game a little bit for a little while, came back a little bit later, so glad that he's all right. But obviously, you're playing with 11 forwards for a little while there, and as such, you have to kind of mix and match while that is the case. But even after Rempe got back and we got into the second period and the third period, we saw Laviolette and the Ranger coaching staff switch up these line combinations a little bit. Veazey was actually in Rempe's spot on the fourth line. That was before Rempe came back. You had kind of the stacked top line at that point, later in the game of Panarin, Mika, and Lafreniere from left to right. And I know some Ranger fans want them to try this out. They want to see Mika and Kreider maybe get split up. It's an option. I wouldn't mess with too much stuff right now, though, given the fact that even after this loss, you've won 10 out of 11. We also saw Kreider, Trocheck, and Kakko all playing together. We've seen Kreider and Trocheck. They haven't played on the same line all that often the last couple of years, but they seem to have some pretty good chemistry when they do. We also had Cooley, Brodzinski, and Veazey all playing together. And one thing I want to mention here as far as the line combinations, some thoughts on that. Jimmy Veazey on the top line, I'll be honest, it hasn't gone as well as I was hoping that it would. I don't think he's out there necessarily doing anything wrong, but we haven't really seen him stand out offensively all that much either, despite the fact that he's now out there with Mika and Kreider. So I get the feeling that, the Ranger top line right winger going into the playoffs, that player right now is not currently on the roster, because I do think the Rangers are going to end up making at least a move or two at the trade deadline. You bring in somebody, likely a right winger. To me, that has gone back to being the Rangers' most glaring need, a top of the line right winger. Hopefully they can go out and get one. Hopefully they can also do so without paying an arm and a leg, but we'll see how that goes. It does seem to be, like we've talked about in the past, a little bit of a seller's market this season. But as far as just the Rangers, changing lines in general in the middle of this game, normally I feel like I wouldn't like this because obviously, as we've been saying over and over here, the Rangers had won 10 games in a row. When you've won 10 games in a row, I don't know. To me, that doesn't sound like a situation where you need a shakeup, even if things aren't going your way. But by that same token, we also mentioned in this episode how the Rangers weren't creating any pressure, no second chance opportunities. They just weren't doing a whole lot offensively. And so I think all these things kind of necessitated the in-game changes here. The Rangers mixing and matching a little bit, move this guy up the lineup, move that guy down the lineup. And to me, it's pretty telling about how this game was going that, again, even with the 10-game win streak, Laviolette more than willing to shake things up a little bit, move some guys around a little bit, deemed it necessary to juggle the lines. And honestly, I don't blame him because, again, the Rangers just weren't doing a whole lot offensively in this game. They tried it. It didn't really work. I mean, it sort of did because, like I said, they got a little bit more pressure in the third period, but no goals to speak of, in the third period when the Rangers were down by 2 goals. And if I had to guess, I would think they'll probably go back to the normal line combinations in the next one. This was just kind of a way to try to jolt them a little bit, get them going. But like I said, I wouldn't go reinventing the wheel because of one lackluster game when you won 10 in a row before that. And I don't think the Rangers will do that either. I get the feeling Laviolette will have the normal lines back out there when the Rangers once again square up with the Jackets this coming Wednesday. So we'll see how it goes. But for the time being, we're going to shift our attention in just a second to Matt Rempe, all these fights that he's getting into. He actually took his first L in a fight in this game. So we'll get to that. A couple other things as well. The Rangers pulling the Rangers special. I think the everydayers will certainly know what I'm talking about there. We're actually going to hear from a couple of you guys on that topic, and we're going to do all that stuff in just a second. But first, we definitely would like to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Camino Consulting. You've heard of our online families and couples course and taken advantage of the Locked On 25% discount running to the end of the month. But what about the live seminars? In both sport and business, the challenge in differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their measurables and qualifications, but we all know it is the intangibles that matter when those things are similar. Contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group become one of the most effective you've ever seen, both because you identified the right candidates and because you've learned how to communicate and motivate them in accord with their own preferences. But if you aren't in business management or working with a team, we pay referrals. Make some money making your workplace and favorite teams better. Every group works better at the end of the year than in week one. So contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to understanding. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here before we call it a day. Got a couple other things we want to get to. And first and foremost, Matt Rempe and his tendency to drop the gloves every single game, take on the tough guy from the other team, and do so usually within the first couple of minutes and usually on his first shift after the game begins. So Rempe in this one gets into a fight just 2:12 into the action. He takes on Olivier. And it's interesting because at the start of this game, it basically unfolded the same way that the one did against Delorier the day before against the Flyers. You had Rempe was at center ice before the game near the red line. Delorier came over and talked to him, basically said, hey, we're going to fight, or, challenged him. I don't know exactly what was said, but the indication obviously being that they were going to drop the gloves. And the same thing happened here. Once again, Rempe's near the red line. He's stretching. Olivier comes over to him. They're talking a little bit, and he kind of knew how this was going to go. And like I said, this was Rempe's first loss. He had a bloody nose. He originally went over to the penalty box, but then he left to go to the locker room and get checked. Olivier was bleeding a little bit too from his cheek, so it's not like Rempe didn't land any punches, but I got to give this one, not by knockout, but by decision to Olivier. And the good news, like I said earlier, was that Rempe was back on the board, or back on the bench rather, a little bit later in the first period. And so another night where Rempe spends more time being penalized. I mean, he wasn't literally in the penalty box for this one because, like I said, he went to the locker room, but he ends up with 4 minutes and 58 seconds of ice time and obviously the 5 minutes of penalty time. So that's kind of been a trend for Rempe so far. He's being challenged at the start of these games, and he's not going to say no. But I just hope that the Rangers, Laviolette, his teammates, the leadership group in there, whoever it might be, they're right now, I'm sure, appreciative of what he's doing, and I'm sure they respect him for being willing to answer the bell and fight. But I hope at a certain point, somebody makes it clear to Rempe that, okay, dude, you don't have to do this in every single game. You don't have to be in a fight every single time the puck drops, every single time you step onto the ice. You're allowed to go out there and play hockey. And look, Rempe, he's a fighter, big, strong, tough, physical kid, and he's not going to shy away from this kind of thing. But again, I just hope that he knows that it doesn't have to be like this in every single game. There's only so many fights you can get into before it starts to shorten your career a little bit. I'm certainly appreciative of the fact that the Rangers have right now a homegrown tough guy, a homegrown enforcer, or whatever you want to call it. And Rempe's going out there and he's answering the bell for his teammates and giving them a dimension that they really haven't had all that often. Reeves was here for a season and a half or whatever it was, but Reeves has gotten to the point in his career where nobody really wants to fight him. So, his presence was still nice, but he wasn't really getting into fights. Rempe's getting into fights left and right here. And again, just not saying no anytime that somebody challenges him. And I do want to throw out a stat here because, this is drawn the way Rempe is played and the way that, it's kind of gone so far for him has kind of drawn a little bit of a mixed reaction from Ranger fans. I think most Ranger fans are into it, but there's a few that are kind of throwing out the idea that if you're fighting just for the sake of fighting, it kind of gets old at a certain point or doesn't really serve any purpose. But I wanted to give a shout out here to Hope on Twitter because she posted a stat that I found pretty interesting here because there are some not necessarily Rempe naysayers, but again, people that just feel like this is getting to be overkill and he doesn't need to be doing this in every single game and it's getting a little bit ridiculous. But this is what Hope had to say. She tweeted out a stat, or a series of stats here, rather. That's what she had to say about the whole situation. People keep saying all Rempe does is fight because he has fought 3 times, but have nothing to say about who he is fighting. And then she listed the players. She listed Rempe first. Rempe has played 5 games for the Rangers. He's got 1 goal and 1 assist. So 2 points in 5 games for Rempe. Then she also listed Matt Martin. Martin has played 35 games this season. He's got 2 goals and 1 assist. 3 points in 35 games. Delorier has played 51 games for the Flyers. He's got 0 goals and 3 assists. So 3 points in 51 games for Delorier. And then Olivier, 28 games so far this season, 5 points with 1 goal and 4 assists. So, yeah, I mean, it's not like, all these other guys that Rempe is fighting are bringing a whole lot else to the table other than, their own physicality and their own willingness to fight. And honestly, reading that stat, it kind of makes me think like, maybe the Enforcer is more alive and well than some of us realize. It feels like recent seasons, the last 10 years or so, the Enforcer has kind of gone the way of the dodo. And it feels like, there aren't really that many of that type still around, where it's somebody that goes out there and basically is just looking to fight. But, you look at stats like that, and obviously there's a lot of tough guys listed there on that list and guys that Rempe has squared up with in recent days. Maybe the Enforcer is sticking around a little bit longer than we thought. And, it's good to, have that. I think, at times it's fine for hockey to kind of get a little bit of a callback to its roots where, fighting was just ridiculously commonplace. I don't think we need benches clearing brawls on a nightly basis anymore. And obviously anybody that does that, they're facing a lengthy suspension, as is the coach. But yeah, I mean, every now and then, somebody's going to throw on the gloves and get into a haymaker or throw haymakers, as we've seen Rempe do in recent games. I think that's okay too. But again, my hope here is that Rempe doesn't fall into this trap where he feels like he has to do this in every game. Look, Rempe, it's part of his game. He's happy to do it. I'm sure he'll get in a few more fights before the season is end. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe in this next game, Rempe doesn't get into a fight. He doesn't have to do it in every single game that he plays. But we'll see how that goes going forward. And then the other thing I want to mention before we call it a day here, the Rangers pulled the Rangers special. They give up a goal, the go-ahead goal, and what turned out to be the game-winning goal. What was it, like 25 seconds, 35 seconds after Edstrom had tied the game? They give it right back to the Jackets. And man, if this is the thing that sinks the Rangers in the playoffs, it really might break me as a fan, because there's no other thing that the Rangers do that really drives you that crazy. There's always things you could nitpick, and there's a couple of areas on this team that maybe could use a little bit of a boost, via the trade deadline or whatever it might be. But this is the thing that's going to kill them. The one thing that the Rangers have done that will absolutely kill them in the playoffs is this lackluster play in the immediate aftermath of a goal. And we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they can get it cleaned up between now and the playoffs. But I've been saying that all season, and the Rangers are way past the midway point at this point. So I've talked about this enough. We're going to go ahead and open the floor to a couple of very loyal, longtime fans of our longtime listeners of Locked On New York Rangers. We're going to first go to Michael here. He's going to lend his perspective. Michael's actually a soccer coach, and he's going to talk about that here. So I'm going to go ahead and play that audio for you guys, and then I'll just react after we hear from Michael.
Hey, John, it's Mike from Buffalo. I think you may already know that my profession is a college soccer coach. We have the same problem in our sport. We're always talking about managing the 5 minutes immediately following a goal. And, the thing is, like with teams, I think successes and failures are experienced in a collective way and always very vague. A team will be, hey, we're flying, or hey, we need to wake up. But I think when you get down to causes and solutions, they're much more specific and individual and usually very simple. So, I'm always kind of telling my players during that window following a goal, do your individual job on your next play and give it your full attention, right? So if I'm a defender and I'm defending a cross, okay, maybe I have to jump up and use the correct technique to head the ball away. That type of specificity. And I think the same is true for these guys. They have to have that same kind of focus. Keep my stick on the ice, finish my check, track a guy back, those kind of simple things that they've done a million times. And then I think when you cycle through, 4 lines and 3 D pairs, you end up with 18 guys making, 1 or 2 simple plays on the shift following a goal, and you're out of the woods. And then the obvious missing piece to all that is the goalie, is Igor. And look, I love Igor. Okay, you were just kind enough to listen to the Christmas song that my daughters and I made for him up on YouTube called Igor the New York Ranger, a holiday song. You guys can search it up if you want. All right, we love Igor, but the truth of the matter is he's got a concentration problem. Okay, I've noticed it throughout his career, at times when he's coming straight out of the locker room, right after intermissions, even the start of games. His headspace for simple jobs is just not what it normally is in the normal flow of play. And the same is true in the immediate aftermath of goals, okay? For him, maybe it's squaring up to a shot or having his glove at the correct height. I don't know, but there'll be simple technical jobs that he would have worked on a million times with Benny Allaire, and he needs to be prepared to do them and focus on them, give that his full attention immediately following a goal. He needs to also be expected to make his next play. Anyway, those are my thoughts on it. Thanks for letting us chime in here, and thanks as always for everything you do covering the team. Hey, John, it's Mike from Buffalo.
All right, so big thanks to Mike for obviously saying that thoughts on what's going on with the Rangers in the immediate aftermath of a goal. I should also point out that both the recording that Michael did here and the one we're going to hear from Liz in just a second, both of them were made before this epic Ranger winning streak. I had asked, listeners of the show to send in their thoughts on the situation. And of course, as fate would have it, the Rangers go on this rampage. But you knew sooner or later this problem for the Rangers would rear its ugly head. So of course, we were able to play it now. But I think some great points from Michael. Sometimes it's just the little things, the details. And the thing that's so weird about this for me is that it just feels like Peter Laviolette is the kind of coach that's just not going to put up with this kind of stuff and is going to drill it into these guys' heads. And maybe he is. And maybe for some reason or another, the Rangers just aren't as focused as they need to be. And I think at times this season, Igor's obviously been a heck of a lot better recently throughout this entire win streak here. But there are times where it feels like, the Rangers skaters and maybe Igor as well, just not ready to put their best foot forward on the shift that follows a goal. And maybe at times it has been a little bit of a concentration issue for Igor Shesterkin. So we got one more. This comes to us from Liz. She is 1/3 of the hosts of the Double Defense New York Ranger podcast. You guys should definitely check them out whenever you get a chance. But she's going to weigh in right here, right now on the issues that the Rangers have continued to have on the shift that follows a goal.
Hi, John. This is Liz from Double Defense. I totally agree with you. It is so frustrating to see the Rangers constantly giving up goals right after they've scored. I don't think there's one specific reason for it either, which makes it even scarier. It seems like there's, defensive breakdowns, there's issues with the goalie, there's losing faceoffs, which all happens right after they score. And if we can't point to one reason, it might be many reasons. And I wonder if it just comes down to, do these guys not ultimately believe that they're winners? Is there something deeply psychological going on with this team? I don't have the answer. It's a frustrating question, but hope that they can turn this around in the second half of the season. Hi, John. This is Liz from Double Defense.
All right. Big thanks to Liz for weighing in there as well. As far as like something psychological going on with the team, I mean, that's not really my area of expertise. I don't know. Do the Rangers have at times like an imposter syndrome kind of thing going on? I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I don't think that's the case either. This is a team. There's a lot of fans, like anytime they get mad at the Rangers, it's like, oh, they're soft, or, they face adversity and crumble. I don't think they're those guys. I mean, this is a team that just 2 years ago faced elimination 5 times in the first 2 rounds combined, and obviously came through the woods and made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Final. But yeah, I think both Michael and Liz hit on some good things here. The Rangers it really just comes down to needing to be sharper in the shift that follows a goal, because if they don't find a way to do that, they're not going to like what happens to them in the playoffs. This can't be the thing that sinks this team. This has just been too good of a season. They've had too many incredible stretches of play. I don't know what the Rangers' exact record would be if you take January off the table. I'm going to have to go back and tally it up at some point here. But they have had a remarkable season. This can't be the thing that sinks them. And I just hope that, again, they figured it out one way or another. I've joked not too long ago in the past about how, well, maybe they've hit their quota. Maybe they've given up so many goals in the regular season, in the aftermath of a goal, that it won't happen in the playoffs just because of law of averages. But honestly, how realistic is that at this point? That it's not just going to fix itself. They have to figure out a way to get it done. And again, thank you to both Michael and Liz for sending in those audio clips, because I've talked about it enough. So it was nice to hear a couple of other fresh perspectives on the matter as well. So that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.